All right. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie. I am the clinic supervisor, so I oversee the evaluation team that does eligibility evaluations. We also do some of those exit evaluations and annual evaluations as well. So thank you for being here today. Let's see. All right. So we are going to be going over some of those questions that have been asked in regards to the DAYC report, and also just going over basic feedback that we have been providing you all. I'm not able to see everybody, so if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. And then this will also be recorded so that you can reference it at a later time if needed as well. All right, so let's get started with some of those frequently asked questions. So one of the questions is, I'm having a hard time with completing the DAYC report on time. So this is a big one that we do get. So the biggest thing is planning ahead. We have a lot of tools that can help. Paola and I have actually worked on creating some tools for you, but overall, just setting those calendar reminders for yourself so that you can complete those reviews 6 weeks prior to the authorization expiring. You really want to make sure that you're completing all your documents, having your DAYC report ready to go, reviewed with the parents, having your signatures, and everything ready and submitted to the service coordinator ahead of time. That way, if they do need to provide any feedback to you, you have that time to get it done, versus if you're waiting the week of everything being due, and then the service coordinator reaches out and lets you know that corrections are needed, it makes it a little bit difficult to get that all done at once. So again, just planning ahead, setting those reminders for yourself. Using that organization chart for providers. So this is the tool that I was mentioning that Paola and I have been working on creating. And it looks like this. When you have a child assigned to you, you will be able to write the child's name, their date of birth, and then with the date of birth, the date of when the child turns 3 is going to populate. You will also add in the date of the initial IFSP, and then it'll give you some of these estimated dates for you to kind of keep in mind. So the estimated date of your periodic or your annual. But then also making sure that you are confirming these dates on your IFSP and the referral. So all of these dates are provided to you. It's just double checking them and finding a system that works for you. If writing it down in a paper calendar works, or on your computer or your phone, but really just making sure that we are working on these items ahead of time so that we can submit them on time, and we're not having to rush those last few days. Another way to help you with completing your DAYC report on time is having a running log of the child's milestones. So remember, you're working with each child at least once a week. Once a week, every 2 weeks, whatever the frequency is. So by the time that you are working on creating your DAYC report, you've already seen them a couple of sessions. So you have a better understanding of what their skills are. So start documenting what some of those skills are. So for example, let's say on April 30th, Johnny started to pull himself up into that standing position. And then in May, he started taking his first steps. And then by June, he was able to take 10 steps independently. That way, by the time that I start working on getting my DAYC going in July, for example, I already know that these are the skills that he can do. And then I can verify that with the parent. So it just makes it a little bit easier for you to keep track. And it's also good when you're sharing this with the family, because sometimes the family doesn't see that progress. So when you put it in a way that lays it out of, hey, remember back in April, Johnny wasn't really pulling himself up, but then he started doing it. And look at him now. Now he's taking those steps on his own. So it's a way for us to show that those parents that progress, as well as helping ourselves when we're working on our DAYC report. And then again, this allows you to confirm those details with the family rather than starting from scratch. So having to do your DAYC from the very beginning.
Let's see, because I think, are you seeing Stephanie also like frozen?
Se congeló, ajá.
Yeah, okay. Let me.
Yeah, she froze.
Yes. Give her a second, because I know that the connection in the office is not the greatest. But give us a second, okay? In the meantime, as she comes back, it is important, right? So what basically Stephanie is telling you here is like ways that you, or things that you can do to help you with being able to be maybe more efficient with your time and so forth, so that you can, you can keep kind of like a log for each of the kids that if you have 10 kids or 20 kids, so you have like this sheet of paper that you have in front of maybe the folder you have for each kid, and you're like putting what things the child did, or milestones that the child was able to achieve and what date, because that information is going to help you at the end when you have to do the DAYC report, right? And then the other thing that's important to keep in mind is it is extremely important to send the documentation on time. And the reason for that is because obviously we work for the state, and there are timelines to do things that are, the due date for the periodic is August 5th. So by July 5th, that documentation has to be in the hands of the coordinator, because they have to schedule with the family that review. If that doesn't mean that, but the review is due next week, I still have time. No, you don't, because the thing is that there's other things that have to happen in order for that review to take place. So that's why we stress out so much the importance of making sure that it is done at least with a month in advance, that it's sent to the provider, to the service coordinator. So that's why you have to plan in advance, because if you plan to do it exactly like the month before, and then they cancel, and then you were sick, and those things happen, and then the documentation is delayed, right? Or you send it 2 weeks before, but there's some arrangements or some things that needed to be fixed or updated, or there were some errors on it. So that back and forth also takes time. So that's why it's extremely important that you guys plan ahead and have your way of organizing yourselves, like the sheet that Stephanie was showing there, like that's Excel spreadsheet that reminds you of the due date, so you can plan ahead. Okay, sorry Stephanie, I just was talking because you were frozen. So
Yes, no worries. Thank you, Paola. All right, and I will be sending out that attachment with the chart as well. It has the formulas in there, so you can put in your dates, and then it'll give you those new dates. It has instructions on how to use it as well. So I will be sending it out later today. All right, so the next question is, how do I fill out the visual score chart? We try to keep it as simple as possible, but essentially just putting an X or a check mark or even the number based on the score for each domain. So making sure that whatever the score is that we're writing on the right-hand side of our section 3 is the same as what is on the table. So for example, here we have this child scored a 58 in social. So if we go into social, they fall in this range, which is below 70 or below. Same with communication, they scored a 72. So communication, they're going to fall in this box because this is between that 71 to 77 range. And then lastly, we have cognitive, which was a 78. So they're going to fall in this range. So making sure that whatever you are writing as a score in that section 3, that it shows the same on your score box as well. This is another reason why we are oftentimes having to send back that DAYC report for corrections, because these scores and our visual is not matching up. So really making sure that we're checking that and making sure that it's the same. So how do I use informed clinical opinion? So ICO. So ICO is to be used when the scores no longer make a child eligible. So let's say that you completed your DAYC and the scores are showing that the child scored above that 78, maybe in the 80s range. So their scores don't make them eligible anymore. So by using ICO, we can allow the child to continue those services if we see that there is a need for continued services. So when should we use that ICO? So when the scores don't match up to those observable skills or behaviors. So let's say that the child scored an 80 in communication. Let's say that the child is able to understand and follow instructions, but when it comes to that expressive area of communication, they're very low. They're not making a lot of words, not making a lot of sounds. However, because they scored so high in that receptive with following instructions, that score doesn't make them eligible. But we're noticing, we're making those observations that the child still needs that support. The family still needs that support with carrying out those strategies. So that would be one of those instances where we could use that ICO. Again, those significant gaps within subdomains. So with communication, if receptive is higher than expressive or vice versa, or even with motor, maybe fine motor is high, but gross motor is lower, or gross motor is higher and then fine motor is lower. The family continues to need support to carry out strategies. This is a big one. So oftentimes when we are seeing the child, we see that the child needs support. They still need that help from us. But again, keeping in mind that we are a family-centered program. We are here to help the family. So thinking about how much support does the family need to carry out these strategies, not the child necessarily. Yes, the child is going to benefit from the family helping them, but again, thinking about how much support does the family need. And also thinking about what are those age-appropriate milestones that haven't been met. If the child is, let's say, 30 months and they are showing us skills that maybe are appropriate for a 20-month-old, but the scores are not showing us that, that's something else to keep in mind with using that ICO. So when using ICO, making sure that we are clearly stating the reason why it is that we're using ICO. Sometimes we see these DAYC reports coming in and it says something very brief, using ICO because child scored an 80 in communication. That doesn't really tell us very much. So again, figuring out what is the reason that we are justifying that we're moving forward with services. So referencing those observations, what is it that you're seeing during your sessions that make you believe that this family needs more support? What is the DAYC telling us? What are the caregivers telling us? Maybe even tying in medical history of maybe family is in the process of getting diagnosis, or they're, about to start some sort of therapy, or they're having struggles with implementing the strategies that are being shared during their speech therapy, for example. So using all of that to justify the reason why it is that we're going to be moving forward with informed clinical opinion. So asking yourself, what age appropriate skills should the child be doing that they're currently not doing? How much support does this family need to carry out these strategies? Did I observe something that isn't reflecting in the scores? So using these answers to justify the use for the ICO. So we really want to start seeing a little bit more of that explanation, not just continue services because we're using ICO, really demonstrating and outlining why it is that we see that there's a continued need for services. So here are some examples of, yes, Paola, go ahead.
Sorry, Stephanie. No, I just wanted to add to what Stephanie was saying. Remember that right? In order to qualify for early steps, children have to show significant delays, right? It's not just a minimal delay, because when a child shows a minimal delay, they're not eligible, because in order to qualify for early steps, you need to be showing a significant delay in one or more areas of development. That's one thing. That's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is, like Stephanie was saying, you have to be thorough in your explanation of the reason, okay? Not because, it's a little bit delayed or it's showing delayed. That's not going to justify, okay? You have to be explicit in, and Stephanie's going to go over some examples in what the reason is. Also, taking into consideration what kind of support the family needs to carry out those strategies, because remember, we work with the families, we coach the families. So if they're needing the support, you have to state that they're needing support in this, and that. And also, you taking into consideration too, one thing to keep in mind too is a discrepancy, like Stephanie mentioned, between in those areas where, let's say, communication, you have a receptive and you have expressive. Sometimes the receptive is super high, but then the expressive is low. But when you combine them, it doesn't give you a low enough score to qualify the child, right? But you can justify by saying and explaining that receptive score was this, expressive score was this. There's a big gap, which shows that there's a delay in that expressive language, and because the child is not doing this and that, or it needs help with this and that, and that is an explanation that will justify continuing the services. Also, that when you are reviewing the IFS, that report with the family, and one of the things to take into consideration, maybe it doesn't have to be for every week, might be, because the child is minimally delayed and you wanted to extend service or continue with services because the family still needs support and so on, that frequency can be decreased to maybe every other week, right? So things like that to keep in mind when you are facing the situations where the score is not low enough to qualify the child. Look at those things if there's a discrepancy in those areas like motor or communication, because they're looking at different, not only, it's fine motor, gross motor, so you're looking at different aspects. So taking that into consideration, but making sure you're very thorough with your explanation of why the child should continue to receive services, and making sure that you're discussing that with the families, because sometimes the families are like, well, I don't think he needs the services anymore. And then you're suggesting, but you have to come into an agreement of what are are we going to continue, or are we recommending to continue, and so forth, so that there's not a back and forth between service coordinators, the families, that you guys are all on the same page. Okay. Sorry, Stephanie, it took longer than I expected.
No worries. Thank you, Paola. Yeah, so kind of like the example that Paola was mentioning in regards to communication, this first example explains just that. So the justification for ICO is the results of the DAYC to indicate a borderline delay in the child's communication skills. So based on ICO, the child qualifies due to a gap between her receptive language, 88, so they listed the score, and then expressive language is 69. So we can see that receptive is very high, and then this expressive is very low. And then they provided a little bit more of that reasoning. So the child has limited words and phrases to communicate. So based off of that clearly indicates to us what is the reason for us using that ICO. We can tell that receptive is high, expressive is low, and the child has those limited words and phrases to communicate. So even if that overall communication score is a little bit higher, it doesn't qualify for our program, but we're noticing that there is still a need for that support. So this is a perfect example. Here is another example. So the child qualifies due to minimal attention to task, which requires frequent redirection, difficulty transitioning between activities, and inconsistent use of two-word phrases. So again, they're clearly identifying what is the reason why we are moving forward with services based on clinical opinion. So I just completed a periodic or annual review and the child scores don't qualify them anymore. So now what? So this is where we use our ICO. So again, clearly stating the reason why we believe that these services should still be provided. So if we continue with the services, it is recommended to review that frequency and intensity of services. Like Paola was mentioning, maybe at the very beginning when that recommendation for ITDS 1 time a week was made, it was because Johnny had this significant delay or gap in that communication, right? But now it's only a little gap. He only needs that little support. Mom and dad are doing great with continuing the strategies, but they just need that little push to get Johnny to where he needs to be. So in these situations, making that recommendation of maybe reducing services. So how do we make those changes to the recommended services? So if we are increasing the services, then that's where we need that request form to be completed and sent separately. And in the next slide, I'll provide an example. But if we're decreasing services, then we don't need that form. Just a justification for the change of services can be included in your email when you're sending your DAYC report to the service coordinator. So for example, due to Johnny scoring borderline scores in communication, so a 73 overall. Receptive communication was an 80, expressive was a 65. There's an increase in words to make requests. He's beginning to combine words and has that increased attention. We're recommending that the services be decreased to ITDS 2 times a month and speech visits 1 time every 4 months. So again, taking that into consideration, what is that progress that we're noticing? Mom and dad or the caregiver are implementing their strategies. We're making that progress. Let's start to fade ourselves out. I know it's easy for us to fall in love with their families and want to be there for that progress. But again, we're only there for a short amount of time, and we really want to set our families up for success. So really making sure that we are not making them dependent on us, but we are giving them those tools and strategies to implement everything and help create these opportunities for their child. So starting to pull ourselves out when we're starting to see that progress. So here is the document that you would be using, but this is only if we are increasing those services. If we are using clinical opinion, probably should not be increasing services. We should be thinking about decreasing because that family just needs less support at that moment. All right. So now let's shift a little bit over into outcomes. So what is the difference between current outcomes and new outcomes? So in the current outcomes section, this is where you're going to list the most current outcomes that are on the most recent IFSP. So the outcome should be identical to what is on the IFSP. So in this section, that's where you're going to report on the status. So whether we did it, meaning that we met the outcome, we're making progress, we're going to make adjustments, this is no longer needed, or we're postponing it. In the new outcome section, that's where you're going to add new outcomes that you're going to begin working on. So we haven't yet started working on these. These are the new ones that we're going to start targeting with the family. These outcomes are not listed on the latest IFSP because these are going to be the new ones. The new outcome should not be identical to the current outcome, but it can be an extension. So this is something that we're also noticing is that we're having a lot of what seems like copy and pasting. So we're copying from the IFSP and pasting into the DAYC report. That's fine for the current outcomes because they should be identical. But when it comes to the new outcomes, these are new things that we're working on. So they should be different outcomes. So I am being asked to break up my outcome. So each discipline should have their own outcome. So for example, a speech outcome shouldn't be combined with the motor outcome. If we are recommending those joint visits, we need to have those separate outcomes per discipline as well. So for example, if we're recommending a speech and OT visits, we need to have a speech outcome and a separate OT outcome as well. If the goals are combined, then it's going to be difficult for us to measure that progress, right? Let's say that we're combining, Johnny is going to use one-word phrases and go up the stairs. What happens if he's consistently making those one-word phrases, but he's having that difficulty with going up the stairs? that goal is going to remain in progress because we're not yet mastering the going up the stairs. So keeping them separate is going to help so that we are able to measure that progress. So here's an example. So Johnny will combine 2 or more words to ask for desired items during mealtime and will begin to walk up the stairs while holding onto the rail or an adult's hand. So this one, we're going to break it up. So Johnny will begin to combine 2 or more words to ask for desired items during mealtime. That's going to be one outcome. And then the separate outcome is going to be Johnny will begin to walk upstairs while holding on the rail or an adult's hand while on the playground. So this is going to make it a lot easier for us to measure that progress because now we can just focus on that combining the words outcome as one single progress and then the walking up the stairs as another progress. So we can still target both of them, but just for us to measure that progress, it's going to be a lot easier. So if the current outcome needs to be identical to what is listed on the IFSP, how will I break it up? So in this situation, we would need to discontinue that current outcome and introduce 2 new outcomes. So I'll use the same example as our current outcome of Johnny combining 2 or more words and then also walking up the stairs. So we now know that we can't have that. We can't have 2 disciplines focused within one outcome. So we're going to mark this outcome as no longer needed. And now we're going to introduce 2 new outcomes. So we're going to have outcome number 1 that's going to focus on that communication, and then outcome number 2 that's going to focus on that motor of walking up the stairs. So when do I need to add new strategies? So new strategies are needed when we are selecting that we're making progress, because that means that we're going to continue working on the outcome. So we need to provide new strategies. We need to change things up so we can continue that progress. If we are going to be making adjustments, so making a slight modification to the outcome, then we should be adding new strategies. If we are creating a whole new outcome, then we definitely need new strategies. So when don't we need strategies? If we did it, so we met the goal, the child, we were focusing on using 1 word and now he's using 2 words. So we met that goal. So because we met it, we're not going to be targeting that one particular outcome anymore. We don't need any more strategies. If we are identifying that we no longer need this outcome, we're not going to be working on it anymore. So we don't need to add new strategies. And also if we are postponing, so maybe we're going to put it on pause and come to it at a later time, then we don't need to add new strategies in that moment. So when keeping the current outcome, do I change the goal, the strategies, or both? So the 3 and 6 month goal are going to be updated to reflect what the child should be doing based on their current skills.
I think Stephanie's frozen again. I don't even see her now. Give her a second. Let's see. Any questions so far with what has been explained? Any questions in terms of when do you need the new, to make sure that you have the separate, like different outcomes for different development areas, right? They're going to be separate, and making sure that if you're going to continue with an outcome, right, we're making progress, it needs new strategies, right? Because you're saying that you're going to continue, you need new strategies, new 3 and 6 months, the same thing with a new outcome, obviously, right? If you met it, right, that doesn't mean that, remember, if the child meets an outcome, that doesn't mean that he cannot continue with services, because that's there, it's met. Now, maybe he's already saying 1 word, but we still need to work on 2 words together or something like that. Well, that's fine. He met the 1 word, but now the putting words together is what we're gonna be working on, and that's the new outcome. So don't think that if you put we met the outcome means that the child no longer needs it. No, it's just that what we put there, we met it, which is great. Now he's still needing some assistance. He's still behind. Now we have to move on to work on these other things or other skills. Go ahead, Stephanie. You're back.
Thank you, Paola. Sorry, not sure what keeps going on. All right. So again, kind of following up with what Paola was mentioning, what else are we going to do to further support that progress? Because we're still going to be continuing those services. So what else is it that we're going to be working on? All right, so how do I incorporate a new outcome, keeping in mind previous goals? So outcomes should be specific, observable, and measurable. So consider what skills a child is currently doing and what's age appropriate for the child. So exactly the example that Paola was mentioning, if we were first targeting having the child use one word, and now he's met that, but let's say that the child is 24 months. We want this child to be using more than one word. So what is going to be the next step? Now we're going to start working on 2-word phrases or even 3-word phrases, right? So considering what skills that child has and what is age appropriate for that child. So where do I write a paragraph detailing the child's progress? So the DAYC report was created to simplify your work. When we are reviewing the DAYC report, we can identify the child's progress through the functional area section. So where we're identifying what the current skills are and what those next steps are. And then even through the status of the current goals / introduction of new outcomes. So if we are noticing that previously 6 months ago, Johnny was only using 1-word phrases, and now we have met that goal, and now we're going to start working on 2- and 3-word phrases. That already shows us that there has been progress. So there is no space in the DAYC report to add a paragraph where you are going to be detailing that progress because it's not needed, because we are able to identify that progress based on what it is that you're writing on the current skills that the child is doing, and then also through your outcomes. You can, if there's something important that you want to share, you can definitely add it to the body of the email when you're sending in your report with the service coordinator. But overall, you don't have to add that paragraph to the DAYC report. So what is the DAYC outline and what is the purpose? So the outline looks at all the areas of the DAYC report, and it's highly recommended for you to have a copy for yourself and review it on your DAYC report before you submit it, so we can make sure that we're catching any mistakes before we submit it. So like Paola was mentioning earlier, just because you submitted your DAYC report doesn't mean that it stops there. The DAYC report then has to go through, let's say through your agency lead, and then it goes to the service coordinator, and then the service coordinator has to go meet with the family. And then after that, the service coordinator takes it back, and then they have to do their own process. So just because you submitted your DAYC report doesn't mean it stops there. It has to continue, following the path until it's fully submitted. So if there are any mistakes that you can catch on your own before you're submitting it, that's going to make the whole process a lot smoother, because then we're not going to have to be reaching out to you so that you can make these corrections, because you're going to be able to catch them on your own. So service coordinators, myself and Paola, we are completing the checklist on certain DAYC reports. And if corrections are needed, then we will be sending that feedback over to you so you can make those corrections. So it's just easier if you are able to complete the DAYC outline on yourself. Make sure that you have everything completed, catching any of those mistakes that we were not having to follow up with you to make those corrections. And then again, please making sure that we are submitting everything on time and as early as possible so that we have enough time to process everything and process any corrections if needed. So this is what the DAYC report outline looks like. Again, it breaks it down into all of those sections. So making sure that you are adding all of the child's correct information, that all the boxes are filled out, that you're selecting if it's a periodic, an annual, an exit, that you're documenting the date that the evaluation was completed, the chronological age. So all of those little things that you can just quickly go through yourself and be like, oh, yep, I did that. Perfect, did that. Oh no, maybe I forgot to fill out the visual chart. Let me do that. Because if you catch that mistake yourself, now you're saving that time from the service coordinator, myself, Paola, having to reach out to you and saying like, hey, can you please fill out the visual chart? You forgot it. And now that's adding a couple more steps, a couple more days in the process when we could have just caught it from the very beginning and then continued with the process. So highly recommend everybody to please download the DAYC report outline on your computer, your laptop, your iPad, whatever it is that you use. And please take the moment to take a look at it before you're submitting those DAYC reports. Right, so I have presented the caregiver with the DAYC report, but they're unable to sign it. Now what? So we know that not everybody has a printer. We know that sometimes it can be difficult to getting those signatures. So we have tried to find ways to make it easier. So if a caregiver is unable to sign, you can send them a text message or an email confirming that you have reviewed the report with them and that they are agreeing to it. If we receive any reports that are not signed, then you will be receiving it back for corrections. At the bottom of the DAYC report, there are some blurbs that you can use. So we try to make it super easy to where you could just copy it and paste it into a text message or into an email. But essentially it just says, hello, today you would add the date. So let's say it was done on July 15th. We went over Johnny's DAYC report for the IFSP review. Please respond if you agree with the findings of the report and outcome by responding to this text message. So you would send this to the parent. They would respond saying, yes, I agree or no. And then you would screenshot that and then attach it when you are submitting your DAYC report. So again, if we are unable to have that signature, this is another way for the caregiver to verify and acknowledge that they have received and that they are agreeing to the DAYC report. If we don't have this, we don't have the signature, we will be sending it back for corrections. And here is a little example. So for example, Johnny's parent wasn't able to sign the DAYC report, but I emailed or messaged Johnny's parent, letting them know that we went over, and if they confirm, if they agree to please confirm, and then they responded saying, yes, I confirm, thank you, I took the screenshot, and now I'm going to be attaching this with my DAYC report. Also a reminder, so I know that sometimes our sessions take place at the daycare and we are not seeing the caregiver. So if sessions are taking place at the daycare, please remember that at least one of these sessions need to take place with the parents each quarter. So this session can take place at the home. It can take place with having the caregiver attend the session at the daycare. It can take place at a different location, but this is that opportunity to have them participate in the session, to be involved. And then also we can take advantage of that opportunity and have them sign the DAYC report as well. Please coordinate with the caregiver and plan early. So again, it's one session every 3 months. So this gives everyone time to prepare. So my DAYC report was sent back for not being family friendly. So the DAYC report is meant to be reviewed with family, meaning that we should be using that family-friendly verbiage. So for example, instead of using Johnny uses one word to express his wants and needs, we could say something more family-friendly, such as Johnny said, more, app for apple and ma for mommy. So this is more relevant for the family. It makes a lot more sense to have it put in this perspective because we're like, oh yeah, that's right. You know, Johnny does say app for apple or ma for mommy, versus he uses one word to express his wants and needs. This is also super helpful for the family so that, again, they can see that progress and they can even save it for their memories as well. Of like, oh, that's right. You know, Johnny started saying app for apple back in July. And now look at him, he's using 2 or 3 word phrases. So again, making sure that we're keeping it very family friendly and oriented for the family. So asking yourself, if grandma is babysitting this afternoon, could she understand Johnny's progress, outcome strategies, etc., and know how to help Johnny? So if not, then this needs to be rewritten because it means that it's not family friendly. So if we are using words that are very therapy centered or, just very vague phrases, and a grandma wouldn't understand, then let's take some time to rewrite it in a way that the family is going to be able to understand. So I need more help. So additional resources, we do have a YouTube page. We have taken the time to go through and record the modeling of the entire DAYC process. So from 0 all the way up to 3 years of age, based on every domain. We have also some videos on scoring, and then all of these DAYC refresher trainings that we have made available have also been recorded and uploaded. So if there's at any moment where you're finding yourself having difficulty with anything, or maybe you weren't able to attend a training, this would be your next stop because all of those tools have been uploaded on here. Yes, Paola.
Me again. No, I just wanted to add something of what you were saying. So it is very important that it's in the family, a family-friendly language. So one thing you do not want to do is transfer the items from the DAYC to the report. Okay, so from the assessment, right? It says, oh, the child is able to pulled off a cloth on, whatever, or he's able to identify 5 items, and you're transferring it like that, just like, because those are items that the child was able to do, but that really doesn't personalize it to the child or tells me what the child is able or not able to do. So when you're writing the report in that first page where you have all the areas, right? You have social, then you have communication, cognitive, then you have motor and adaptive. Write it in your own words. Child has been observed to, use word approximation, such as he can make this animal sounds, or he gets very excited when that comes to the home. Parent has told me that he, when he goes to the park, he's very excited. He's looking at the other kids. That is a lot more relevant than putting items of the DAYC assessment into the report. Okay, so don't do that. Just write it in your own words. It's gonna be a lot more effective. You're gonna save time, trust me on that, because you're writing in your own words based on what your observations, what the parent has told you, and so forth. Because you have to think about it in this perspective. Let's say you have 2 kids who are basically, kind of similar, right, in what they're doing, because they have a few words, they're using gestures, and then you write the statements of the DAYC assessment into your report. They're gonna look like exactly similar reports, and it's not gonna, there's 2 children, and the report looks exactly the same because I'm just using the statements from the DAYC. Okay, so for me, when I'm reading our report, it makes more sense that I see, oh, Fulanito is able, he's using some words such as, agua and ball and things like that, than to say he has 5 words in his vocabulary. What are those 5 words? So think about using your own words when writing this report. It's going to be a lot more effective, and it's going to be able to tell a better story of where the child is at than if you use those statements from the DAYC assessment. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, I understood.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I
perfect.
understood too.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so just make sure you use your own words, that you are, don't rewrite what's on the DAYC assessment into your report. Put it in your own words, make a paragraph out of it, like what you've observed, what the family has told you, and so forth, because the score is already there. You can always go back and see what the child was able and not able to do in the assessment. But in the report, what you want is a description of the child's current abilities and what the next steps are but in a family-friendly language, because like Stephanie said, you are discussing this with the families. That the purpose of doing that is that you are having that discussion and that you all agree on what's written there. That's why you have the families sign it. Okay, so that's the purpose of it. That's it, Stephanie.
That's perfect. Thank you, Paola. And just an example, earlier last week, I was taking a look at a DAYC report and they were talking about the motor area and they were using some words that even I didn't understand, about different positionings. And I had to go and Google and see what they meant. So myself, not saying that I know everything, but being familiar in the field, and being a little bit more familiar with, motor development and such, if I had a harder time with understanding what was being described in the DAYC report, now imagine a family who doesn't have a background in development or, in child development. They're going to have a very hard time. They're going to see this and say, like, I have no idea what this means, so I'm not going to implement any of these strategies. So again, that's really the center of our program, is being very family friendly, because again, we want to empower our families and give them all the tools and strategies to help their child and help them succeed. So if we make it hard with the way that we're describing things and writing things, then we're just making it harder for them, and that likelihood of them implementing these strategies is going to decrease. So we really want to make it very family friendly. That way they are encouraged and feel supported in continuing these strategies. So thank you for bringing that up, Paola. And lastly, again, I am here for any help that you may need. Paola is also available. So if you come across any issues with your DAYC when it comes to administering the DAYC, scoring the DAYC, or you're filling out your DAYC report and you're stuck, you don't know how to maybe word your informed clinical opinion justification or whatever it is, please feel free to reach out. We are here to provide that support, and we definitely appreciate when we get your feedback or when you reach out. It definitely makes it a lot easier for everyone as well. So please feel free to reach out if anything ever does come up. But thank you again, everyone, for joining. And I'm going to open it up for any questions that any of you may have that were not covered during the training today.
It's funny. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, Laura, before, make sure to ask the questions first off, and second of all, it doesn't bother any of us, Stephanie or me, that you reach out to us and you say, can you review this with me? Because what we really want is for you guys to be comfortable and confident in what you're doing, so that it's, if you're hesitant and you don't know, am I doing this correct, and you need some feedback, feel free to reach out to us, because we appreciate that, and we want to support you in making sure that you feel that you know what the expectation is and what is expected that you have to submit and so forth. So always feel free to reach out to us, and we'll make the time to meet with you and go over and give you some suggestions to make it that you feel more comfortable in what you're doing. Okay, go ahead, Laura. Sorry.
I was Stephanie, is there any way that you can share the link so I can go to the YouTube link that you share? Because I was trying to find with the name and it's not showing anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to add it into the chat right now, but I'll also add it in the email that I'll be sending later today.
Okay, perfect.
And I did have somebody mention that when they went onto the website, it said that they had to create an account and pay. You don't have to pay, it's free. So if you're getting that pop-up, just refresh your screen. I don't know why that came up, but if you encounter that, just refresh it. And if you're still having issues, please let me know and I can try to troubleshoot with you.
Questions, concerns, comments? Come on, don't be shy. You're doing this often. Questions or concerns that you have, things that have come up that you have, that you want to ask something, feel free to ask, because your question might help another one.
I have a question. So Stephanie, you said it at the beginning, this will be recorded. It can be found in I'm sorry, my name is Gisela. I'm a brand new ITDS. I'm sorry.
No worries. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you. You mentioned that it will be recorded for us to review if we want to.
Yes, that's correct. So maybe, oh, go ahead.
And the website that you just presented?
Yes, correct. So maybe by the end of the day, I'll have it uploaded, and if not, maybe by Monday the latest. But I typically try to upload them pretty quickly on. But there you'll find all of the previous trainings that we've hosted, and then I'll be uploading today's as well. And then there's also other videos that can help with administering the DAYC or just tips and tricks. But everything is going to be on that YouTube page.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, or maybe any like tips and tricks that you have identified that work very well for you that you would like to share with others? No, nothing? All right, perfect. Well, again, like we mentioned, we are here to provide any support. So with any questions, anything, please feel free to reach out. The link for our YouTube page is in the chat. So please feel free to save it, to bookmark it, and then I'll be uploading today's recording up on there as well. And then I will be sending an email a little later today with some of the resources that we talked about today. But thank you everyone for taking some time out of your day to be here. I hope that you are leaving with some information. And again, please feel free to reach out if anything comes up, and we are more than happy to provide support.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Bye, everyone.